Walcott, who can run away from them. Blind trying to buy him a bit of time. Ozil, two!
This is Barkley, away from Otamendi. He's got two runners to his left and one to his right. Barkley wants to go alone, and why not?
Manchester City are still alive here. Balotelli, Aguero!
Hello and welcome to the Football Hipsters English Breakfast episode 15. Stop laughing, Danny. I am your host, Kris, and as you might have guessed, I've got Danny with me as usual, and stepping in for Ross this week, joined by a regular crew member, Mr. John Welsh. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hello.
Good evening.
You know this is going to be hard work with me and John on because we're like the naughty kids at school at the back of the class throwing bits of paper at you when you're not looking.
Danny, it's hard work with you on full stop. Adding John into the mix will only make it harder.
Oh, come on. I haven't got any hosting responsibilities.
No, that is true, and there's no sound
Can't get in
effects.
too much trouble.
It's true. We should say that Ross is fine. He's just gone back home for the weekend. I think he said it was his mum's birthday. I think he said so. Happy birthday, Mrs. Bramble, if you're listening. If not, then ignore everything I just said. But Ross will be back next week. So, what we got to talk about? Well, we're going to focus heavily on the Premier League again because, by our own admission, all three of us don't know a lot about the Championship. So we'll leave that to Ross. So we'll talk some Premier League. Danny, we're going to start at the very top of the table because that's where all the excitement is. And we're going to work our way backwards because there was two quite significant games today being Sunday. Let's start with Leicester. Or plucky Leicester, as apparently we're supposed to call them now. They went to Sunderland and they came away with a 2-0 victory. Jamie Vardy was once again having a party. And surely, with 5 successive clean sheets, that this is Leicester's title now. Do you think?
It has to be. Well, they've got 5 games left to go. And,
I believe so.
And the Spurs have got some tough games coming up. They've got Chelsea, which Chelsea can try and kill as many of the Spurs players as they can because they hate him even more than I do. And they got Stoke away. They got Southampton to play. And then I tweeted today that the Southampton will get a draw out of that. And some bloke said, "No, you won't. Southampton, they'll beat Southampton." I thought, well, he doesn't know Southampton then, does he? Because Southampton have got a hell of a defence and they're riding high in the league and had a great game yesterday. But yeah, no Vardy, no party. That's the way it goes. And it just shows what a fantastic team they are with the fact they just play a nice and simple 4-4-2. They remind me very much of, not a young Lenny Henry, but of the old George Graham Arsenal days. And there's been a lot of speculation about certain additives that they may have been taking. But those certain additives don't teach you how to defend, do they? Because I think pills that will teach you how to defend overnight are quite a way in the future, and Max Headroom style. So, yeah, they're absolutely brilliant, solid at the back, brilliant in midfield. The Drinkwater-Conte combination in the middle is superb. And Sunderland, well, they weren't really much, actually. They didn't really do anything. I listened to the whole game on the radio as I was snoozing, but I wasn't losing. Barini managed to have a shot on goal and kicked himself in the face with the ball. I don't know how he managed. I've not seen it yet, but I heard it on the radio. They went, that is almost physically impossible. Defoe probably had one of his quietest games of this of 2016 because he has been one of the most informed strikers. And Villa, who's had a decent run as a Sunderland midfielder this season, was taken off round about half time. As usual on WhoScored.com, it doesn't tell you what time they were taken out. I should have the other one open as well. But it sounded like a game that would have been interesting to watch, but there's no way that they are not going to win the league this season, partly because they're brilliant, and partly because Spurs have got some really tough games, and partly because Arsenal will probably be facing the wrong direction for the rest of their 6 games.
There's less confidence in the club we support for you.
It is.
John, let's just kind of turn it around a little bit and look at this from the other perspective, which is that of Sunderland, sort of kind of chop the two together. Do you think they would have looked at this game and thought, it's a write-off, we've got bigger games to come against closer rivals, i.e. Norwich next week? Or do you think Allardyce would have looked at it and thought, we could have got something from a home game, even though it was Leicester?
No, they can't afford to look at any game other than just go and try and get 3 points, the position they're in the league. It was going to be tough today, but the bizarre thing is that everyone knows how Leicester are going to play. They've done the same thing all season. They've done it very, very well and consistently, and that's why they're top of the league. But the fact that no one's really tried any sort of way to combat against that, the quick ball over the top, trying to play it in behind defence, exploiting Vardy's pace, no one's done anything against that. The Sunderland defence, I only saw the highlights of the game. It looked poor again, to be honest. Centre backs being pulled out of position, being caught in upfield and stuff. There was a few good saves from Manone. And like Danny said, Defoe was very quiet. I think the problem is that sort of playing that kind of one up front when it's Jermaine Defoe doesn't particularly work because he didn't have any service most of the game. Barini had two very good chances, and I saw the ball to the face one, which was just laughable. I don't think I've ever seen that in a football game before. But he had a really good chance after that he put wide. So they had a couple of half decent chances, but the second goal came obviously so late on when they were pushing up the pitch. I think the Norwich games obviously is the big one for them, but they've got to try and get something out of every game they play, because like getting nothing out of today's game is not going to help them in any way.
No, I agree. I'm going to ask you on all of the relegation issues. I'm going to ask you both a one-word or one-answer question, so to speak. Sunderland, up or down, Danny?
Down.
John?
I'm going to say tentatively up.
Ooh, controversial. Okay.
That was a double ooh.
Double ooh. Let's move on to Leicester's only title rival. I think us three, people know we are Gooners, so there's no point hiding it. But I think all three of us, even me, the eternal optimist, can admit it's a two-horse race now, if it indeed is even a race. But let's talk about Tottenham. They entertained a Louis van Gaal's side with Ashley Young up front. Interesting. And they got spanked. Kind of a blitz of goals from Spurs. Ali in 70, Alderweireld in 74, and Lamela in 76. John, I'll start with you. Do you foresee Tottenham matching Leicester stride for stride to the end of the season and still coming up short? Do you still think that they have aspirations to win the title, or are they just kind of doing their bit and hoping for the best at this stage?
They're doing everything they can to try and win the title still, because they're just going out and winning their games. They are doing it for the most part very impressively. This one I saw a lot more of, and they were very good. Other than I think a sort of, I can't remember if it was the first or second half, but Martial had a really, really good run and beat a few Spurs players, got into the box and got his shot away, but it wasn't good enough to beat Lloris. Other than that, it was basically lots and lots of Spurs pressure, that high pressing they've been doing all season, decent chances falling for Kane and Eriksen. If it weren't for De Gea, they would have scored more goals in this, Tottenham. They had a lot of success out wide against Man United. Darmian came on for, was it Fosu Mensah? Who's a player.
Well said.
Yeah, it's a guy from the youth team, I assume. I've never heard of him before. Yeah, the number 51 on the back, so I assume he's a youth team player. But yeah, Darmian came on, who's a player I really used to like in Syria, and I thought he'd actually be quite good, but he was awful. He got absolutely roasted down the side. They started with a conventional striker in Rashford, but then LVG playing Young up front was bizarre, and why he insists on playing Juan Mata as the wide man instead of at the number 10. Just strange things. But as for Spurs, I still think they've got a chance. I know they've got tough games, but Leicester haven't got it easy. You saw Ranieri at the end of the Leicester game show some real emotion. There was tears in his eyes at the end of the game. I think it's finally not dawned on him, but it was we are so close to winning the league now. Whether that'll have any effect on the team, I don't know. I hope not. Not just because I'm an Arsenal fan, but I just think it would be a nice story for Leicester to win it. It would be more like football used to be before the Premier League, because that is a thing that did exist. I know everything's done from like 1990, was it 92, 93, whenever it was the Premier League started. So I think Spurs have got the chance, but it's down to Leicester slipping up, really.
I think that's probably a fair comment. As you say, Rory, I was going to say Rory McIlroy. Then I'm watching the golf. Who on earth would have known? Claudio Ranieri, not Rory McIlroy, would certainly have did look emotional at the end of the game. And as you say, I think it has finally kicked in. What about this? Going back to Spurs, Danny. How do you think they'll look at this season if they do come up short? I mean, taking off our Arsenal hats, which I know is tough when we talk about our bitter rivals, but do you think they'll look at this season and think, well, we're in Champions League, which obviously I would have guessed at the start of the season would have been their aim. but ultimately they finished above us, or could potentially finish above us, still win nothing. Will they look at this season as a giant step forward, or will they look back on it and think, what could have been?
I think everybody below them, all the other big 4 or 5 teams will all look at that. I mean, Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City, Man United and us will all be looking at that, as well as Spurs will, as what could have happened, because there's so many points behind. And yeah, it's not like they haven't spent well. They've got a decent manager. They've got so many young players that have made it through to the England squad. It's a season of onwards and upwards. But there again, I've got my fingers crossed that they'll do what Arsenal did when they moved to a new stadium. Everybody will be in a fire sale. And Pochettino will be off to Man United, and then they'll just, they'll do terrible next season, because they can't. They're going to get loads of money from the Champions League, but you can't see them spending all that money on new players, can you? Not when they're going to have to try and finance a new stadium. So they'll look at this season as more money in the pot to pay for the stadium, I should think. But like everyone else, missed chance.
Agree. And Man United, just quickly on them, Danny, do you still think that LVG will be gone? I mean, there's still a lot of rumours that he actually will stick around now, but do you still think he's a dead man walking?
Well, there's been talk of that De Gea, not De Gea, as the bloke who was on the radio today, Stuart Pearce, kept calling him De Gea. That was annoying me.
Stuart Pearce.
Yeah, De Gea. I think there is big rumours that he's off to Spain for 45 million. Which is massive amounts of money. I think I heard on the radio that Van Gaal has been told to, or Van Gaal has been told to, blood more players and play different players in different positions, because some of them are going to be going in the summer. But when you've got something simple like, I'm looking at the wrong game. That's what I was looking at when Arsenal played Man United and we scored 3 goals against them in 13 minutes. I just wanted to see what the time difference was in the number of times. But when you played Rashford, who, bless him, he's barely out of nappies. When you're playing him up front rather than playing Martial up front and playing Mata behind him, who for the last 4 or 5 years has been one of the best number 10s, even though he wears 8, like John was saying. Simple things like that. Carrick shouldn't be anywhere near the first team. So he's making so many mistakes that the people who own the club and run the club must realise that his style of football doesn't go down well in the Premier League, doesn't go down with the players at the club, and if they want to get anywhere in football, they need to get him out sooner rather than later.
Cannot see him sticking around myself, but
just quickly on that, I know a lot of Man United fans, and they all do want him gone. And obviously, there's lots of talk on Mourinho as the target. But from everything I've read, it's actually more Jorge Mendes, Mourinho's agent, trying to get him in at Manchester United rather than them pursuing him. And now bookies are giving odds that he's more likely to end up back at Madrid than he is in Manchester, and they really do think LVG will keep his job, which seems incredible with the things that's going on at the club. And it also, just lastly, just before we move on, that I know Danny said that Tottenham maybe take it as a little bit of a disappointment. I actually think for them it's a massive thing, because getting top 4 is huge and probably something they didn't expect to do this season. And the fact that they've got an exciting young manager and a very exciting young team and a collection of players that, with the Champions League money and the new TV money, they might actually be able to keep them together and develop on that for next season. And they'll be in a stronger starting point than a lot of the sort of the big boys as such that have got a real big overhaul on their squads to go through. And also, just I know we don't like praising Spurs, but Eric Lamela was a player I really liked before he went to Tottenham, and his third goal today was really, really good. He missed the sitter, but the third goal in particular was a fantastic finish.
Did you hear in the podcast this week about Van Gaal that he's been offered the head of the Dutch FA to go above Danny Blind, who's Daley Blind's dad?
Yeah, apparently he's not interested. Yeah, he wants to stay at United.
There was also talk that Mourinho has signed a pre-contract, and that if he doesn't get the job, Man United have got to cough up 15 million. I find that hard to believe, but if there's any truth in that, then they can't afford that. They'll have to give him the job, won't they?
I think
very strange.
I think with Mourinho, a lot of it stems from self-publicity. I think he's desperate to stay in the public eye to get a big job, because if you look at this summer, there aren't that many big jobs left. I think he's just sort of trying to keep his stock high. And although I have to say, John, you will back me on this, a certain job in a certain Italian club might be coming up for grabs again. And he had quite a good time. Exactly. And he had quite a good time there before. He has always said he'd like to go back, and I just wonder.
Them. We're all Inter fans, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. He ruined the club, though, didn't he?
He won us the treble.
He made them successful, but obviously wherever Mourinho goes, generally the club is a bit hated for a while afterwards. So I suppose, it's the price you pay for success. You can't take away his success, I guess. But Hey ho, let's move on. Right, let's come sort of down the table a little bit, which leads us nicely onto Arsenal. Oh dear. We had a very funny tweet actually just recently from James CEO at loss or loss less. That's quite a tricky one. Can I just express mail you this bucket of tears as an Arsenal fan? Danny, sort of sums it up, doesn't it? 2-0 up away at West Ham, notoriously a very good side. They've had a really good season, unbeaten at home for ages, yada yada yada. Arsenal 2-0 up and cruising. Then all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, 3-2 down. Fairness where fairness is due, came back, showed a lot of character to get back to 3-3. But is this points drop for both sides after sort of a 3-3 result? Great game of football, but it doesn't really help either side, does it?
As much as I hate to say it, I think that's a point gained for Arsenal because the goal they had disallowed, West Ham, before Ozil scored, that should have been a goal. They should have maybe had a penalty, and then they had another goal disallowed where Carroll got his 14th yellow card of the game not given to him, where he dived on top of the goalkeeper, held him down for a 3 count while someone else, I think Lanzini, put it in. So you got to think, how the hell can you be 2-0 up and then not shut the game down? Iwobi was magnificent. I mean, so much. I can't remember the last time I saw a young player with so much promise. But he's thrown by just before half time, because Carroll scored 2 more goals just before the end of half time. They do often say that cliche, 2-0 is the most dangerous score to have, and it showed yet again that yes, it was. Arsenal bottled it like they always bottle it when the pressure is on. So yeah, at the beginning, I suppose when we're 2-0 up, it is 3 points dropped, but by the end of that game, yeah, we were playing 9 up front. I'm surprised we didn't bring on Cech and play him up front as well. But it's nice to see that Wenger knew that we needed to bring people on and knew that we needed to play more attacking football, and that's what he did, and we got the goal. But West Ham are going to look at that and go, yeah, that was 2 points dropped. But I think they were hard done by. They should have had at least one more goal and maybe a penalty.
Yeah, they definitely were hard done by. Some of the talks of conspiracy, I think, it's a bit far, but they certainly were hard done by, particularly with the first goal. John, with regards to sort of Arsenal's situation, I'll wrap this into one, if you will. Arsenal's situation, surely now they've got to be looking to cement third from their perspective. And from a West Ham perspective, can you see Andy Carroll, who some would say, me included, probably shouldn't have been on the pitch to score that hat-trick, but has he maybe forced Roy Hodgson's sort of envelope to be resealed or reopened and resealed with names in it? Do you think he might get on that plane?
I think sadly for Andy Carroll he hasn't, because Roy Hodgson has his favourites. He's got his list of players. I think his squad's already picked. As Arsenal fans, we already know that if Jack Wilshere gets like a minute of game time, he's going to be on the plane. Which I love Jack Wilshere, and I'm not a huge fan of international football, but I know it'd be a big thing for him, and he'd want to play. But how you can take a player after sort of 5 minutes of football is unbelievable. I think the game overall, it perfectly sums up Arsenal. That game was their season in a nutshell. Look very good, and then completely throw it away, and then show a little sign of encouragement by getting a goal back, but ultimately don't really do anything and just stay where you are, and just end up at parity. It kind of sums up where the club has been for a while now. It feels a bit stale. I think despite the fact that West Ham are 2-0 down, they probably will feel a bit let down, because Slaven Bilic clearly got his tactics wrong at the start of the game. They were fine going forwards, West Ham, but defensively they just they didn't quite play the three at the back with the wing backs properly, and Arsenal exploited that really well to their credit. But they got the 2 goals back because they started hitting the balls into Andy Carroll and giving him the service that he needs to score goals, and then they switched their system, which really worked. And again, like Danny said, credit to Arsene Wenger as well. He actually threw players on, which is not something he generally does. He threw on a lot of forwards. Iwobi, who's a very young player, ended up playing centre midfield for part of the game, which is really impressive for someone of that age. Mixing it with players like Kouyaté, a really physical presence. So it's frustrating as an Arsenal fan, but now, it is just concentrate, try and get third place. The big game for Arsenal now, obviously you have to go and try and win everyone, but it's the Man City game looming towards the end of the season, which sort of feels like a I think someone put it as the awkward third place playoff in a World Cup finals, the horrible wooden spoon game.
Third, fourth place playoff.
Yeah, just it just really anticlimactic for both clubs really. West Ham though, they've had a cracking season. I do actually think, despite the fact Andy Carroll should have been sent off in the game, that is obvious. I do think West Ham really have had awful decisions against them all season. So I understand their complaints slightly because there's an argument they should be higher up in the league with some of the things that's gone against them. But if they can finish sixth or maybe even fifth, that's an amazing achievement for them going into their new stadium.
Absolutely. We should also say at this point, congratulations to Leicester, because no matter what happens with the Championship race, they have officially secured Champions League qualification today. So we should mention that. Danny, John's mentioned Man City, and we should just touch very briefly on them. I mean briefly because this game was terrible. But they beat West Bromwich Albion by 2-1. A word for a former Arsenal player, Samir Nasri. In a situation where he's probably playing for his future under Guardiola. I thought he had a pretty good performance yesterday, and a game that probably Wilfred Bonney effectively signed his exit because he was terrible. But City win 2-1. How many of those players, just roughly, do you think Pep might even consider keeping now?
First of all, your point on Nasri, yes, that's his second game, his first start since he was out in September with quite a bad injury. Lovely taken goal. The Sessegnon goal, that was a beautifully taken goal as well. But as soon as they got the penalty, you thought, well, the game's all over because they'll just end up steamrolling them. But Boney, what is going... Yet another... Players, if you're listening out there and you're at a medium-sized Premier League club banging in the goals, don't go for the money. Go where it's going to adapt your game, where you're not going to have to adapt your game, and where it's going to suit you, because he was brilliant at Swansea and he has been pants for them. But there again, modern players are mercenaries, aren't they? So how many of those players are they going to keep? Well, he's going to keep Joe Hart, definitely. Aguero. And I think that could be it. Oh, De Bruyne, obviously, yeah, De Bruyne. And like John was saying, maybe Clichy and Sagna.
So you think the likes of, for example, Kompany, Fernandinho, you think they could all be surplus to requirements?
Well, yeah, most of them will be surplus to requirements, but whether they leave or not, I've no idea. Because you can't... It's like somebody said on the radio that Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool, Man United, all these players all want to get rid of about 10 players each now. Where are those players on $100,000 a week going to go and still earn $100,000 a week? China can only have a certain number of players, and when China has spent 150 million buying in Theo, they're not going to have much money left for everybody else, are they? So...
My God, there's wishful thinking. I tell you where they'll probably end up going. They'll probably end up
Sunderland.
They'll probably end up going to another Premier League team with all this money coming in. Somebody lower down will afford them. But I did think it was quite funny that Yaya Toure kindly stepped into the media this week and announced that he had chosen to move on from Manchester City. It has nothing to do with the fact that Pep Guardiola would have bombed him out the first person as he walked in the door. I thought that was rather rich of him to say that he's decided to move on. But hey-ho, enough of my Yaya bias.
Where's Pellegrini going, do you think?
That's a good question. I can see him back in Spain as talk of Valencia, I think, at the end of the season. I think
That's a bit of a step down, isn't it, from a team where you've won 2 titles? He has won 2, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you like to see him at Arsenal? Not that Wenger's leaving.
Do you know what? I don't think I would, because I think he's too similar to Arsene. And I think we'd have the same situation we've got with Arsene now.
At least the money would get spent, not on decent players, but at least we get spent.
Well, you say that, but how many of those signings has Pellegrini bought himself? You'd have to ask that question. I don't think many of those signings were his.
Is it Zubizarreta? Is it? No, the other one, the unpronounceable Spanish name.
Oh, what's his name? John, help me out here.
Tixi
Bagshaw.
Oh, the guy who used to be at Barcelona.
Bagestaran.
Yeah,
Bagestaran or
something like
Bagestaran? Yeah.
We've butchered his name enough.
Yeah. The Spanish bloke, he sits up there with a Spanish hat on. Yeah. Mildly offensive there, sorry. But so Man City came out with a victory. John, let's slide down further still. So obviously we covered Man United and West Ham. What about the chasing pack? Southampton and Liverpool. Let's pick on those 2 games as a whole. So obviously Southampton probably going to focus on that game more in depth with Newcastle, but they got a victory in Newcastle by 3-1, and Liverpool drubbed Stoke by 4-1. Nice to see Divock Origi proving he is actually quite good. As I said he would be. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But Liverpool 8th on 48 points, and Southampton are now 7th on 50 points. Don't think either of those are going to make the top 4, but would you say that potentially a Europa League spot could be a decent finish of the season for both, given the fact that Liverpool could, of course, still win the Europa League, and Southampton were experiencing it for the first time this season?
I think that Liverpool probably had higher expectations for this season, especially once Klopp had come in. Although he will be actually given some time to change the team and develop, and you've seen that development over the course of the season. And at times they've played some really, really nice football, particularly today against a team in Stoke who their season's been fairly good for them. They're on for, I think, one of their highest finishes I think they've ever had in the league. But you don't expect that Stoke defence to concede 4 goals. But for Southampton, I actually think they'll be a little bit disappointed with the season. Despite where they are in the league, I think they expected more after the year they had last year. The improvements they made to the squad, Coman having another season there. So I think they probably, when they look at the table and how teams like Man United and City and Arsenal have sort of underachieved to expectations, how well West Ham are doing, Southampton will probably think, why aren't we, closer maybe to 4th spot? I think it's a little bit too far for them now, but I think they might look at it as an opportunity missed and be a bit disappointed with the season overall. It's still a good finish for them, but I just think in the context of this season, in the Premier League in particular, they probably would have wanted to do better. But, a good result, perhaps expected against Newcastle, but still a good result nonetheless.
Do you think they missed Jack Butland much? That young bloke they had in goal, the young Dane, I think it's only his second goal, and he's Scandinavian, he's Danish, he's only his second game ever for them. They had Shea Given on the bench.
I think it's a real worry when you lose a first choice keeper, because you've seen like with Arsenal with Cech at times, and I think if United, when they didn't have De Gea at the start of the season, it's not just how good a goalkeeper they are, it's how the organisation of the defence is. And
it keeps defenders confident as well to know who the player. They've. Not that they won't have a relationship with the backup keeper there, but that the main defence is going to be training with Butland, all throughout the season. They have a relationship with him, same as Arsenal will have with Cech, and the Man United players have with De Gea. And you see when that first choice keeper goes out of the team that no matter how good that keeper is who comes in, it takes time to build that up. Especially, and you have to build there's a difference between building a relationship in training and on the pitch as well. It's a completely different environment.
Yeah, because Lloris had the same when he was out. When they had Vorm, I think Spurs struggled for form as well.
And Vorm, Vorm's an experienced keeper as well in the Premier League. He's got a lot of experience and he's a decent keeper, but they still struggled.
One quick thing on Liverpool, must be great to have Skirtle back.
Is he back today? Yes.
Yeah, he started today because even Toure had a better game than Skirtle according to the Opta ratings, and Sturridge playing again, which is weird that they started him and didn't play him against Dortmund and rested him against Dortmund, and if he's rested most of his best players today for this game, outfield players, makes you wonder why isn't he playing Sturridge against Dortmund this time? It doesn't look like he's not playing midweek either. And Milner had a great game with 2 assists and man of the match.
I'm going to pat myself on the backside here, and I don't do it rarely, but I'm going to
do it all the bloody time.
I'm going to take a bit of credit for this. I said on another podcast that you and I do, Danny, where
mention it.
A lot of people on a Birdcat Wonderland, available at all good podcast retailers, and some free crap ones as well. But I was roundly mocked for saying Divock Origi would be a very Jurgen Klopp type of player, and I think so far I'm starting to be proved right, because he's got pace, he's got enthusiasm, he's young, he's a player that sort of is desperate to impress. I think everything Daniel Sturridge isn't. Sturridge he strikes me as very egotistical. He's undoubtedly got a lot of talent, but if you look at how he was at Chelsea, how he was at Man City, he's always trying to dictate to his manager where he should play and how good he is.
He's been at 3 of the biggest clubs in the Premier League and
not succeeded.
Moved on.
The kid's obviously got a lot of talent, but I think he worries a bit too much about social media and his public image than he does about actually getting things done on the pitch. And there was a game, I think it was the Premier League game.
I don't think you can knock Daniel Sturridge's goal return. His injury problems he's had over the last year have been a serious issue for him. But you look at his rate of return for goals; it's unbelievable.
I think it's
fantastic.
I think it's the on-pitch persona is what I'm getting. I'm sure it was a game last week.
I'm not sure I mind that though so much. That arrogance and being. I was talking about with a friend the other day. I can't remember who it was. Liverpool playing, and he should have passed the ball, but he was very greedy and took the chance on himself, and he didn't ultimately score. And Liverpool could have got a goal out of it. It's frustrating if you're a Liverpool fan. But if if you've got a striker up front for your club, you want him to be greedy and to take those chances.
Oh,
And to be
no,
fair, most of the time he does.
Yeah,
He's
no,
got 48 goals in 84 games.
That's a great record.
I'm with you on that. I was more referring to. I'm sure it was the last Premier League game where Klopp was bellowing at him the whole game because he basically just refused to run. I think it was more that. It was more that when a game's not going for him, he tends to drift out. A little bit Theo Walcott syndrome, yeah, where he just drifts out of game.
The Premier League, 40 and 64.
Yeah.
Wow. We'll have him. Something for Theo.
He's undoubtedly talented, but I think if you ask a lot of Liverpool fans, and if there was a big offer this summer, I think they would seriously consider it. But yeah, interesting. Let's move on for Liverpool, and let's go down to Danny's favourite end, the bottom end, and talk about a few things going on there. We'll briefly say Aston Villa are gone. I mean, it's only a matter of time now. They could have gone this weekend. It's not official yet, but they lost at home to Bournemouth. Danny, just quickly, I don't know if you noticed this, but Callum Wilson was back on the bench for Bournemouth. Had a really good start. We did. I think he only got the last minute or two, but he had a really good start to his Bournemouth career, and then got that cruciate ligament injury.
He came on in the 92nd minute.
He did, but he was visibly touched to get some time on the pitch, and it's great to see him back. And Bournemouth, 11th in the table. Who would have foreseen that at the start of the season?
I think the Bournemouth fans and Eddie Howe and most of the players, because they have amazing self-belief. They never give up, do they? And talk about that, another team is playing 4-4-2. And they're playing for the manager and they're playing for the fans. And some of those players, I don't think many of those players there have got much chance of going and playing for many other. They're not going to get massive moves, are they? I'm just looking in their starting 11. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 English players in the starting 11, and then 2 more that came on. I mean, that so reminds. Yet again, I'm moaning on about the old days, but that does remind me of the old days. Playing 4-4-2, you've got an English manager, and most of your team's English. And that's then, as a fan, I associate with most of those because I'm an Englishman and I support an English team. Although we didn't mind the odd smattering of some dirty foreigners. But coming over here, grabbing our money when they're 38 years old.
Playing better football than our English players, yeah. How dare they?
No, we got Paul Iderson. That doesn't count.
Johnny Jensen as well, yeah.
Yes, and Johnny was all right. But yeah, they're gone. Have we done Chelsea yet? Have we covered it?
No, we'll come on to that.
Oh, good. I want you to quote the quote that the manager come out with. That was, if you don't, then I'll tell you what it was. It's absolutely sheer genius, I think it was.
Guidelin or Hiddink or Guidelin?
Hiddink.
Okay, yeah, I'll come back to you on that one.
Okay, good. As long as I got it, I was partly asleep, so I might have dreamt it. But it's just fantastic to see that a small team with some decent players, and most of the squad they kept from last season, and the players they did bring in. Oh, got the hiccups. We got in just straight away, didn't they? Tyrone Mears, and I think another one of their players
Max Gradle.
Yeah, Max Gradle, yeah, that was it. I'm glad you remember because I don't. He played today. And, so some of those players, they spent big money on, they never actually got to use. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's lovely to see. And, Villa would have gone down if it weren't for the fact that Norwich lost.
Yeah, they will go down next. I think they're away at Old Trafford next week, so I think even Man United will be able to score goals past Villa. So I think
but Robbie Savage was slating them, saying they're the worst team. They're worse than the Derby that he got relegated with.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I agree with that. I mean, they're both just as bad as each other, but I think they probably are worse. Because remember that Derby team having some half-decent players in them.
Yeah. I think what Robbie Savage's point was is this Villa team just doesn't care, whereas at least the Derby side cared. They just weren't very good. There's a big difference there. But no, we've gone into Villa in debt, so they are gone. John, I want to move on to Newcastle. And I want to read you a quote, if I may. You might have seen this, but for our listeners,
fire away.
Our listeners who haven't heard this is from young Newcastle defender Jamal Lascelles, who
yes.
you might recall signed for Nottingham Forest last season, along with Cardalo, and he hasn't had many games, but he started to come through. These were his direct quotes after the game, the 3-1 loss at Southampton. He told the BBC, "We need bigger characters on the pitch, players who care and players who are going to go out and get after each other. We have lacked it this season, and no matter how good you are, if you don't have that fight, hunger and desire, it doesn't matter. We had Steve McLaren, who's a great manager, and we've now got Rafa Benitez, who's a great manager. So it's clearly not that. It's the players, and we have to take full responsibility. It's ourselves who need to change and not the manager. We need to play with more heart. We've got flair players, tricky players, players with loads of talent, but we need more heart. We need more desire." John, what would your response be to that if you're one of the senior Newcastle players. Do you side with the argument of who's this upstart? Who do you think you are, coming out in the press and saying that? Or do you look at it from the perspective that I certainly would and go, you know what, if a kid who's 21, 22 can come out and realise that we're bottle jobs, then we should be looking at ourselves?
I'm sure they'll try and spin it that way, but the senior players are probably quite annoyed with him. And, well, actually, I say they're quite annoyed, but half of them probably, to be perfectly honest, don't really care, because they certainly play like that. It's bizarre, Newcastle. You don't understand when you look at the squad and some of the players have got, like the young lad said, they should be doing so much better. And they have had really good managers, and they've got a very good manager. I've read, I think it was from last season, that there was problems in the dressing room, and there was sort of the French contingent, and there was sort of a clique, and then there was the few lads that have been at Newcastle for a while together, and they were all in a separate group, and then some other foreign players had come in, and they just weren't getting on well, and it's just it's just a toxic atmosphere within the dressing room to a certain extent. They just don't look like they trust each other on the pitch. They don't, in a way that Villa do it as well, that there's no real communication. Because most teams would be quite happy to have, say, Sissoko in their team. John Joe Shelby's an experienced Premier League player, has obviously come in. Janmat, I actually think is a very good player. Stephen Taylor, lots of experience.
Is that the Janmat that I got shouted at for liking pre-pod?
Yes, that was that.
We'll come on to him, Danny. Yeah.
They've got a lot. When Eldham's come in this season, he's a really good player. They got Iosi Perez, who I know they didn't spend a lot of money on, but he's very good. Mitrovic. You go through that team. There's great players there.
Seydou Doumbia, who you know well, John, as well, and Diabate from Bordeaux. The signings that have signed and not played.
Yeah, it's bizarre what's going on there. Southampton are a very good side, and you can maybe take this result out of context from the rest. But from a young player to come in and say that, he's obviously experienced it since he's moved to the club and sees that kind of attitude. And I don't know what it is. Is it the players they've recruited have that attitude? Or a lot of them have come in from abroad. And this is not a foreigners have come over to this and, just want the money thing. But it seems to have been since they started that policy of getting all, sort of cheaper players from the French league, if you like, are all quality players, but just aren't performing on the pitch. The last time I remember a Newcastle team doing well was when they still had like Yohan Cabaye in the side. So maybe there is a lack of leaders there, but it's just not good enough. And I feel sorry for the Newcastle fans because there's such a great fan base. And, that club is absolutely adored by them. It must be. It's one of those stadiums I've always wanted to go to. I've never been to a game there. And, they look like they're going down, probably. And they've got a great manager there who they're more than likely going to lose now at the end of the season.
It's a fact that he's not going to be there. I thought you could make yourself a legend there, Mr. Benitez. If you went down with them, stayed with them, and he would take them back up straight away, wouldn't he?
Yeah,
with
but
a bit of selling and a bit of moving on.
But this is an ex-Real Madrid manager, he's going to get a bigger and better job.
It's not just the losing the manager and the players that will obviously want to go and be moved on and whatever. It's the owner as well that the Newcastle fans frankly don't want there either. Who, as much as I know they don't like, at least he has invested he has invested his own money in the club. But I know they certainly don't want him there, but they're going to have to put up with him for seemingly a while longer.
The winning Mong.
I think it's sadly, there's obviously something wrong in the dressing room there, and it's one of those things where maybe they need to go down, strip those players away, and
they've
try
got
and
contracts, haven't they? They haven't got relegation contract
release clauses for relegation.
The thing is that there's enough good players there that teams will come in and individually pick off players from that squad.
But not for the money they've paid from him. What would they pay for Shelby? 15 million. He goes down. What are you going to get from 8 or 9 at the most?
No, you may not. But I think now the windfall payments you get for going down from getting relegated from the Premier League is something ridiculous, like £70 million, isn't it, just for getting relegated? It's obscene money. I don't think the money comes into it as much as it used to.
I think the concern is much like Aston Villa, and Ross made this point and has made this point several times, that really Newcastle are now in a position where I think arguably they started recruiting the right type of players, like the Shelby's, the Townsends in January. Like Villa should have recruited some players ready for the Championship. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the title-winning side of Newcastle in the Championship, if they of course went down. Now you'd look at Newcastle and you go, right, yeah, they'll go down, they'll come straight back up. But much like Villa, there isn't a lot of English, sort of what you would call Championship ready players in the Newcastle squad. And if you look at the squad that came back up, that went down to the Championship in 29 and 10 season, they had the likes of, I'll just reel these off, Steve Harper, Kevin Nolan, Fitz Hall, Mike Williamson, Joey Barton, Danny Guthrie, Marlon Harewood, Rain Routledge, Andy Carroll, Ryan Taylor, Alan Smith, Nicky Butt, Leon Best, Jonas Gutierrez. Who else have we got here? Damien Duff, Jose Enrique, Fabrizio Colacini, Stephen Taylor, Tim Krul. I mean, that's just to reel off some.
And Fat Sam as manager, did you say that?
Yes, well, there you go.
He's one of my favourite managers. I know people don't like him, but I do.
Exactly, even Shola Ramiobi. So they had players there that were what I would call, some of them are Premier League, decent enough for the Premier League, but they were all more than decent enough for the Championship. And if you look at, as John says, that Newcastle side now, any assets in that Newcastle side will be gone. Musa Sissoko is not going to play Championship football. Neither is Mitrovic. Strikes me as a guy who probably would, because he seems like he's a local, folk here already. But Jose Perez is already being talked of going overseas.
Wijnaldum is way too good for them.
Yeah, they'll be cherry picked. And even Tim Krul, all of these players will go, and that's where Newcastle are going to find it hardest. Can they rebuild? But
you'd imagine they've got a decent youth set up, haven't they? I know, like Aston Villa, they're rock bottom, but their under-21 team are running away with the second division of the under-21 league, because it's Aston Villa first, might be Derby second, and Arsenal third.
They've got.
I think besides Villa's poor recruitment policy, the other thing was they got the wrong manager.
Many times.
Yeah, that's fair,
but I think as good as Remy Gard was in France,
I
why on
Remy Gard
earth?
quite well.
Why on earth you would bring in a manager who doesn't know the league at all for a squad that, let's be honest, has been on the verge of being relegated for the last 3 seasons,
and
realistically.
And about players as well, about transfers.
You needed, they needed a Sam Allardyce, a Nigel Pearson, someone who knows, Tony Pulis, a manager who knows how to get you out that sort of situation. Yeah, someone who knows how to get you out of that situation and gets the best out of players and goes, right, this lot are no good for this sort of task. Just get them out of the squad. This is what I need. I'll get the job done with them, and then you start again. Then in the summer go and get your Remy Gard and rebuild.
Yeah,
they just did it all the wrong way around.
That is it? It's not trendy to go for a reliable manager, like Kris just said. Neil Warnock, he went to Rotherham when they were, I think, 8 points. They were third from bottom in the relegation zone, 8 points behind the team above them. In the last 9 games, they're all unbeaten. They're the most informed team in the Championship, and now they're halfway up the table. And that's Rotherham. Rotherham should be like, you think of Rotherham, you think the 4th division, don't you? You don't think doing well in the Championship. That just shows that just because you're old and English doesn't mean you shouldn't be given a job. But then they go, oh no, we're going to go and get some bloke like John was saying, Remy Gard, who's never managed in England. He's played here, but that was in the late 90s. He played over here, or young English managers. I mean, look at Eddie. Is it Eddie Howe?
Yeah.
Look at him, and stunning manager. Given a second chance by Bournemouth after I think he went to Preston, didn't he?
Yeah, yes, I think he
replaced Peterborough's Darren Ferguson when he got sacked from there. But it's a good point that you can't just go. You need to get the right people to do the right job, not just bring someone in and go, oh, he'll do it. He's done. He looks all right. No, can't do it. Can't take risks.
No, I agree. Let's move on from Newcastle, because we could talk about them for hours, and I'm sure Newcastle fans don't want to hear it for any longer. I do.
There's
a
really, really good book out at the moment. It was about the Newcastle Faustino Espria, Kevin Keegan days. A journalist has just written a book about that, and that's one book I think I'd read that, because I have a soft spot for Newcastle, especially back in the day.
I'll let you look that up in time before we go. Let's just quickly touch on the other game that was of significance down that end of the table, which was Crystal Palace 1, Norwich City 0. John, just quickly on this game, massive result for Alan Pardew and Crystal Palace. They have been without a win for God knows how long. They finally got the all-important 3 points. It moves them 6 points clear of the next team below them, which is in fact Norwich. Do you foresee that as having Palace safe now? They've got a game in hand against Everton this coming Wednesday. you would fancy them to beat Everton, given Everton's away form, maybe? And is that it for them? Are they safe now?
I think whether they get another win or or even a draw in the Everton game, I think they're just far enough away from the teams that are down there that are in such poor form that they should be okay. There's not a lot to talk about from that game because it was awful. It was honestly one of the worst games of football I think I've ever seen.
Indeed. We were told that, weren't we?
Yeah, we were. Our friend of ours, Simon, who's been on, who I think you did an interview with, didn't you, Kris?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, he was at the game, and I think even Alex Neil said after the game that's one of the worst games of football he's ever seen as well. It was dreadful, but good result for Palace. They really needed that win, and Pardew certainly needed the win. But for Norwich, I don't know. I'm always confused by Norwich because at times they look like they can play some really nice football and produce some good stuff, and they've got exciting players like Redmond and Naismith, who they got from Everton, is a player I really like, but then they just throw games away and just put in terrible performances. The guy they got up front, I quite like as well, Mbakani. He looks a decent forward, but there's no consistency in that team at all.
He's very Adebayor light, isn't he? Got all the attributes, and he sometimes turns it on, sometimes goes missing. Question then for you both. We did it with Sunderland. I'm going to pick on the other three teams, and then I'm going to ask you a quick question about that massive game next week, which is Norwich Sunderland. So quickly then, Newcastle, Danny, up or down?
Sadly down.
And John, up or down?
Yeah, I think Newcastle probably down.
Okay, and Norwich, up or down? John, start with you.
I think they'll go down. I think Sunderland are going to creep their way out of it.
Okay.
I'm the opposite to John.
And you think Norwich will stay out, Danny, and Sunderland will go?
One game in hand, but 4 points behind. And when Sunderland have only got 4 points in the last 6 games, and Norwich have got 7 in the last 5 games, then 6 games, then we've got to.
I'm putting all my money on Jermaine Defoe.
That book. Do you want to hear about it?
Yes, go on.
Touching Distance by Martin Hardy. I just tweeted him telling me talking about it. It says, at the start of February 1992, Newcastle United were facing relegation to the third tier of English football. For the first time in their history, they were also facing bankruptcy, and St James's Park had been neglected. The club's best players had been sold. In a daring move, they appointed Kevin Keegan, blah, 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 blah. So it's $15.90 on Amazon, or only £8 if you want the Kindle version. So I think I'm actually going to buy that when it comes down to be a bit cheaper. And we all fondly remember those Newcastle days.
A little shout to Martin Hardy there. I've just followed him and retweeted from our pod account. So if you do want to do that, you can find it there. Yes. And here's the $1 million question then. I want to ask you both. Sunderland against Norwich, or I think Norwich are at home actually. I'll quickly check for the fixtures. Yes, it's the 12:45 game, which almost guarantees it'll be 0-0. But it's the 12:45 game next Saturday. Norwich and Sunderland, what I want to ask you both is, if somebody wins this, i.e. it's not a draw, are they the team that stay up? So that's what I want to ask you that question. John, do you think that the team that wins that game stays up?
Yes.
Danny, do you think the same?
Yep, but just look at the form. Norwich at home 5-5-6, and then Sunderland away 2-4-10. So they've lost 10 away, and Norwich have won 5 at home. So I think that, for me, I reckon it's going to be a bit of a ding-dong. I reckon it's going to be maybe 3-2 Norwich.
Could be goals. Definitely can't defend both sides. Okay, before I give our listeners the rest of next week's fixtures, Danny, you just have a quick story to tell about the Swansea, the Hiddink quote from the Swansea game. Chelsea losing 1-0. It's their first defeat under Hiddink. Sigurdsson with the winner. What did Big Gus Honeybun have to say?
Now, I'm sure it was some manager. It might have. I'm just looking at the table here. They've got 4 games left to go, which is 3, 6, 9, 12. That's 56 points. I'm sure there was a manager quoted in the Premier League this week who said, we can still win the title. Or we can still get relegated. And it couldn't have been Chelsea.
No.
Do you know who it was?
I don't know who it was.
Could it have been Van Gaal?
It sounds like a sort of a Van Gaal thing to say.
So they've got 6 games left to go. So that's 6, 12, 18. That's 60, 72 points.
It could also have been a Roberto Martinez type thing to say, because he's always one to spin a positive from a negative.
Too many points away. They've got 7, 3 sevens, 21. That'd be 61 points. No, the best they could finish would be 3rd. So someone have a look it up. And I think he said it during an interview, so it should be the video somewhere. I remember thinking at the time, that's hilarious. But I was drifting in and out of sleep at the time, listening to
the only
Klopp
quote
as
from
well.
that game that I remember is Hiddink saying that Antonio Conte's announcement as the new Chelsea manager had no effect on the result.
No.
Which I think is accurate, because I think Chelsea have basically gone, well, we've got nothing to play for this season. Their players are essentially, they're
bench.
done now for the season. Swansea, however, I think, Goodlin's come in. It's been very quiet. Nothing's really been said about it, but he's really turned around their season. Got them into safety, and they might get it's possible they can get a top half finish as well. So well done to him.
I
think it was Louis van Gaal. It says Louis van Gaal, mathematically we can still win the league. Speaking ahead of Man United's Premier League clash with Aston Villa, was that this week?
That is next week.
Next week, manager Louis van Gaal. I've said How and Gaal because it turns out I'm reading. It said that the side can still win the league mathematically. There you go. That was a genius quote.
Interesting. Good old Louis.
We'll
John,
miss
just
Louis needs to check his maths. They can't, because they can only get to 71 points.
He's wrong again. Just for a change, he's wrong again.
Man United have played 32, so they've got 18 points left. Yeah, only 18 points. So that's going to put them on 71 points.
Oh, Louis, you can't.
Oh, Leicester hadn't played, had they?
No, that's
right. There we go. We've solved it.
We should also say Everton, drew 1-1 at Watford, but in a largely game that doesn't really affect either end of the table, so we'll just touch on that.
Did we mention just how good the Crystal Palace goal was? The bloke had only just come back from injury. Oh, that was a corker. Ran the limb partway through the middle of the field, like most players do. Left foot, whack, top left-hand corner. Hello.
Good finish, wasn't it? From Jason Punchin, former Plymouth Argyle player, Jason Punchin. John, just before we take some listener questions, and indeed read.
You can't stop saying Leicester.
No, I can't. And indeed read some fixtures for next week. What I want to ask you is quickly, Guidolin. As you say, he's gone very under the radar since he's come on and done an excellent job at Swansea. There's a little bit of talk going around about the Italy manager's job. He's never had a big job, Guidolin. He's never had the opportunity. Do you think he'll stay at Swansea, or do you think he will stick it and go, no, actually, I quite fancy Italian job, and push for that?
No, if the national team job comes up, he'll take it without a doubt. Yeah. And he is one of the favourites at the moment, because the only other real sort of front runner is the Sassuolo manager, whose names I've just gone blank.
Di Francesco?
Sorry, Eusebio Di Francesco, who probably should be the real pick for the job. Guidolin does certainly deserve the chance. He's a very good manager. He's been really underrated, the places he's been at the smaller clubs. And Di Francesco probably would get the job, but he's not a fancy name as such. And whilst Guidolin is maybe, people over here haven't heard of him so much, in Italy he's more known. So I think there's a better chance of him getting. But if he gets offered it, he'll definitely take it. There's no doubt. Di Francesco is probably more likely to end up at Milan.
Mm. Oh yes, of course, because
Mihajlovic will be off to Lazio. Oh yeah, they're all changing.
They're all switching around, aren't they? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well that pretty much wraps us for the bits and bobs of this weekend's games. Let's look ahead to next weekend, full fixture list again. So we mentioned Norwich Sunderland opens up the weekend's games on the 12:45 kickoff. You then got Manchester United, Villa, Everton, Southampton, Newcastle, Swansea, and West Brom and Watford. They are the 3 o'clock. So you got Chelsea, Man City, which could be fun at 5:30, and then you've got Bournemouth, Liverpool is the 1:30 game on Sunday, along with Leicester, West Ham, and then Arsenal Palace at 4 o'clock, and Stoke City versus Spurs is the Monday night game. So could be quite a pivotal week upcoming, one would suspect.
Do you know why the week after that we've got a game on a Thursday? Has that ever happened before in the Premier League?
I think it has. I'm sure we played a game on a Thursday before. It's basically because of the FA Cup. When we had that whole replay. It's bizarre, isn't it? Really bizarre.
I don't like it. That's podcast day for
it is.
Bergkamp Pod.
It is.
Well, that means on Thursday night you're going to be after doing a radio show.
Me and John have already covered this. We're going to have to do a radio show, and we thought it was next week. We thought, Christ, we're going to have to do a satchel and a radio show. Luckily, it's the week after, so we're safe. But
I would have called in sick. But,
yeah, you would have. I know you would have. Right, just a quick touch on the goal scorers. Harry Kane is still top of the charts on 22. Jamie Vardy's 2 goals today gets him ever closer. He's now 21. Aguero 18 on with Lukaku 18. Mahrez 16. Eddie Odion Ighalo 14, Jermaine Defoe and Olivier Giroud are on 12 apiece. And as far as the assists this season, Mesut Ozil still way out in front on 18.
And he had most of those by Christmas, didn't he?
He did indeed. He's been a bit quiet recently. David Silva on 11, Riyad Mahrez on 11, Christian Eriksen 10, Dele Alli 9, De Bruyne 9, James Milner creeping in on 9, Deulofeu, Houlihan and Payet on 8 apiece. That's
How about disciplinary?
I can give you disciplinary if you like. Victor Wanyama, my friend and yours, top of the old points tally, 3 red cards, 6 yellows. Sadio Mane, another Southampton player, Tut Ross, 4 bookings, 2 red cards. James Milner, boring James Milner, 7 cautions, 1 red card. Same for Mark Noble. And then Jack Colback and Alexander Tete at Norwich. Both have had 10 bookings this season with no sendings off. So there you go. There's a couple of stats for you. Right. We were sent some homework last week, Danny, from one of our good listeners.
I got on it straight away.
Yeah, no, you did not, you liar. At Checky Nando's lad, one of our... he's in Czech Republic. God bless him. I didn't realise that until this evening. So good evening to you, sir.
The home of Thomas Rosicki. Thank you for him.
Absolutely. Now, his task was, he asked me and Ross last week, but John has stepped in to do it as well, to create a team. This was his question, to create a team or squad of the season, excluding Leicester, Arsenal, Man United and Spurs players. So I will read Ross's out first, because Ross couldn't be with us tonight, as I said earlier, but he has been good enough to send me his squad. We've made squads up rather than 11s, so we filled the whole lot. So here's Ross's side. He's gone with Butland, Zabaleta, Ogbonna, Van Dijk, Charlie Daniels, Mark Noble, Ross Barkley, Kevin De Bruyne, Dimitri Payet, Philippe Coutinho and Romelu Lukaku.
Only one from Southampton.
Yeah, indeed. And his substitutes, there's another one coming up. Odion Ighalo, Neom from Watford, Gerard Deulofeu, Stephen Davies of Southampton, Willian, Sergio Aguero and Cook from Bournemouth.
So you put Butland ahead of Forster Fraser?
Yes, he did.
Traitor.
It's his team.
Having him out.
It's his team, so...
Sacked.
Absolutely. And if my cat will get out of the way of my PC screen, I'll read you mine. Thanks, Tom, if you wouldn't mind just shifting your fat bum.
Is he giving you the old hairy wink?
Oh, he is. He's just stood right in front of the screen. He's hopped away now, luckily, so
good.
A cat's life. Right, so the team that I have gone with is... if I can find it, listener requests. Here we go. Right, I have gone with... In goal, I've also gone with Jack Butland. Right back, I've gone with Neon. Centre backs, Van Dijk and Ogbonna. Left back, Peters from Stoke City. Midfield, 3, Kevin De Bruyne, Ross Barkley and Willian. With Dimitri Payet and Marko Arnautovic behind Romelu Lukaku. Yes, that is Lukaku.
You got Lukaku up front.
Yes, I have.
Oh, behave yourself.
No defenders in midfield.
Just because I don't...
No defensive midfielder.
No. Just
How's
because
Lukaku better than Aguero?
Just because I don't fancy him doesn't mean he hasn't had a good season, so no. My substitutes bench, I've got Scott Dan of Crystal Palace, Stephen Davies of Southampton, Mark Noble, West Ham, Gerard Deulofeu, Philippe Coutinho, Odion Ighalo, and I actually did pick Callum Wilson, although he's had a season obviously of injury. I thought that that opening start of the season, I thought he was absolutely fantastic, to the point where I actually wanted him to come to Arsenal. That's
all did.
How highly I rated him. So he's got in. Right, let's read out your two teams then while we've got you. Let's start with John's. So,
bearing in mind, I did this 5 minutes before we started recording because I was a late recruit.
And
at least you weren't told no every time you picked a player. No, you're not having him.
Listeners, when you hear Danny's team, you'll know why I said no. But anyway.
He's picking on me again. Who do you think you are, Gimli? How dare you?
John's team is Jack Butland, Ryan Shawcross, Bakary Sagna at right back, Aaron Cresswell at left back with James Tompkins, Kouyaté of West Ham with Jordan Henderson as the holding mids, Marko Arnautovic, Dimitri Payet, Kevin De Bruyne behind Romelu Lukaku. Substitutes Joe Hart, Nathan Ake, Charlie Daniels, Willian of Chelsea, Nathan Redmond of Norwich, Jermaine Defoe and Troy Deeney.
I feel bad now. I didn't pick Mark Noble because he's been one of the best players of the season.
He has,
very good.
But at least you gave different answers. Otherwise, we'd all have the same teams.
That is true.
You're going to point out that 3 times I said I wanted Man City, and then finally I said I'll have the Aston Villa team. You wouldn't let me get away with it.
No, I wouldn't. So here's Danny's disgrace of a joke of a team. Fraser Forster in goal, that's fine. Jan Matt of Newcastle, who are doing brilliantly this season, right back. Brendan Galloway of Everton at left back, give you that one. Ryan Shawcross and Winston Reid, I'll give you those two. Midfield, holding pair of Emre Can and Victor Wanyama. Dimitri Payet, Willian and De Bruyne are his attacking three behind Sergio Aguero. I guess that's not too bad. And then
the best striker in the world.
And then it really goes off a cliff, the substitutes. Thibaut Courtois has had probably his worst season in a Chelsea shirt. Vincent Kompany, who's barely played. Gylfi Sigurdsson, fair enough. Raheem Sterling, who's done next to nothing. Yaya Toure, who's done next to nothing. Odio Gala, give you that. And Daniel Sturridge, who's been in hospital for half the season. So there's Danny's team.
I wouldn't stand for that, Danny, because Kris has got Scott Dan, who I think plays for Crystal Palace, who were 16th in the league.
And listeners, we'll let you in who Chris's main striker was. It took us an hour to get rid of him. Was Marouane Chamakh up front because he had his promise.
No, it was.
See, my idea with my team, Kris, dear boy, is I look at it as a 2-season thing. At the end of this season, I'll sell all that team and I'll buy a load of new ones. So I picked all the expensive ones that are rubbish.
You heard it here first, Danny.
It's a long game.
Danny is the king of, well, I don't know. He's the king of something.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so there we go. So thank you, Checky and Anders Lad. As usual, if you have got a bit of homework that you want to set our pundits or myself, at the FH Podcast is where to send it to. Send us your requests if you've got teams of the season, or if you want to do a, bold 11 or joke 11 or players with the longest names 11, whatever you fancy.
Bearded 11, Bagsy, Brian, Kilcline.
Thanks. We'll give
We
it.
can't do ones that sound like car noises because it'll just be Newham.
Yeah.
Every time I always think of Formula One whenever he.
And Carr. Have him.
You can have him. Yeah.
And we won't regard it very highly at all.
Oh dear.
Right.
Jody Morris.
Very good. Right, we're going to take some questions, and then we're going to leave our listeners to their breakfast or their dinner or their tea or whatever they're having.
I've got cheese.
Joaquin at Morning Pint, who's
good pod.
Gentleman in the US of A, does this pod of his own. It's very good. Do check it out.
It is.
Name 3 players. You're going to have to think on your hips here, guys. But name 3 players on clubs likely to be relegated who would be useful for top 6 clubs. So we're going to have to play speculation here. We're going to have to say that clubs are going to be relegated. So let's all agree Villa have gone. Should we all agree Newcastle are probably going to go, and can we put Sunderland in just for the strength of this argument?
If you want to do the bottom 3 that are there now to make it easier, yeah.
Okay, so let's say the bottom 3 are what they are now. Let's do this between us. So any shouts for anybody? I would say Sissoko at Newcastle.
Capoue.
Wijnaldum.
Hang on, Capue's at Watford.
Oh, he's at Watford, isn't he?
Yeah.
My bad. Oh, no, you know what I'm thinking of? Mvilla.
And Villa, okay,
Yeah.
from Sunderland. Jermaine Defoe, someone take a punt on him, a top 6 side?
Yeah.
Long-term Gestetti? No, not Gestetti. No. Who's
Just
the young Irish bloke?
Oh, Grealish.
Jack Grealish.
Jack Grealish, long-term.
I wouldn't have anyone from Aston Villa.
I would take Idrissa Gueye. I think he's good enough.
Tim Krul's a decent keeper.
Yeah. Again, we're looking at top 6 here. So
Wijnaldum then.
Wijnaldum, not sure if he wouldn't do a bit of a Depay if he went to a top 6 club. Remain unconvinced. Shelvey, not for me.
No.
Any other Sunderland
Townsend,
players?
decent. He's still young. 2 goals in his 7 games.
Oh, I tell you who actually, as a bit of a long-term one, who's the young kid at Sunderland who runs like an old school?
Oh, yes. The ginger lad.
I'll have to look him up.
Begins with W, doesn't it?
Yeah. Watmore, yeah.
Watmore, yes.
Yeah, I think he could.
Power.
I think he could be. Actually, in the future, I like him. He's a decent player.
I also like Lamine Kone of Sunderland, who's an ex-Lorient centre-half. Big, rugged, strong, quick, like him.
A couple of years ago,
Kirchhoff.
Larson for his free kicks.
Yeah, I think he's a bit past it now.
Nothing now.
Yeah, Jan Kirchhoff, I think, could be. He's obviously a Bayern Munich player, technically, but I think he could probably do a job at a top 6 side as well. So
yeah, I wouldn't take one player from Aston Villa.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
Van Arnholt, he's a decent fullback.
I would take Idrissa Gueye and I'd have a look at Jordan Ayew from Villa, but that's it. Maybe Jordan Veretout just because I'm biased and I like French players. Anyway,
Wes Brown just for the Duracell jokes.
John O'Shea as well. Lee Clattermole.
Wes Brown's 36 now.
Good grief, and he's as old as me.
Wow.
He's older actually.
Actually, Vito Manone, he's a decent keeper.
Top 6.
Not top 6.
Top 6 now.
No.
Excellent question, Joaquin. Excellent question. We went well over on that one, but excellent
People
question.
should listen to his pod. It's very good if he still does it. What the hell was that?
I think he does. Yeah, I think he does.
Did you hear that noise?
I think
Oh,
that
that's
was
very strange.
my headset that went wonky just briefly there. Sorry about that.
I thought we were in a what's those the people with the robots that do it.
Oh,
Daleks? No,
Dar-
no.
That's it.
Oh, right then.
Choco Block, wasn't it?
No.
Crikey, we got off a cliff here. Right. Drawing it back on. Thank you, Sean. Drawing it back in. At Checkaholic, another one of our regulars. Ranieri lifting the Premier League trophy at Stamford Bridge. Do you think it will happen? And do you think Claudio Ranieri wants to lift it there? John?
I hope it will happen. I think it will. I've backed Leicester since like January, I think it was, and I got laughed at by a lot of people. So yeah, I hope it does. I don't think he's actually bitter towards Chelsea in the sense that a lot of people think. I don't think he's bitter towards the fans or anything like that. Maybe slightly towards the management, or the board, a little there at Chelsea, but. Yeah, I think it'd be nice for him, and I actually think that the Chelsea fans would probably applaud him. I don't think they'd boo him or anything like that. But yeah, it'd be nice for him, I suppose. I don't think there's any bitterness though.
No, I agree. We just had a run-in for Danny's daughter there, so hi, Sean. Danny, next question is for you. Michael Filetti, who's another regular listener. Hello, Michael. How far can Leicester go in the Champions League, taking into consideration that they will most likely be in the Champions Pot, which sounds like something from Harry Potter, but how far can they go, Danny? Do you think they can build on this season?
Which team was that? 'Cause I was just telling someone to shut up.
Leicester in the Champions League, how far
Right,
can
okay. I'm not sure how well you're going to get on in Europe with the. In Europe, you can't get away with having 30% possession, can you? And they play quite. Well, I suppose maybe against Italian teams they do quite well, but I think they're going to go straight into the group stage, like you said, and they may just get out of the group stage, but they're going to have so much money, aren't they? And I don't think those players, when they come up against the likes of the front three at Barcelona or Juventus, because they're going to come up against one of those teams, aren't they? Because Leicester have got virtually no pedigree in Europe.
No, Leicester will
They're in
go
the
straight
Champions
if they
pot.
win the league. Then they go straight into pot one.
Do
So
they?
they won't. Yeah, they changed the rules so the
Doesn't go by
winners of each
coefficient
league.
anymore.
No, the
So
winner
they'll-
of each league goes straight into pot one.
Well,
But-
then I'd say they definitely
but-
get out of the group stage.
But they could arguably draw a Real or Atletico Madrid if they finish third in their league, for example. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, they might get one biggie, but like John says, they should avoid three biggies. They should get two beatable sides. But then you look at what Ghent did this season. I mean, who knows? Look at how Celtic did all those years ago and the games of Barcelona. I mean,
They
I
beat
think
Barcelona, didn't they?
I think if they can actually stick to the philosophy that they've played in the league this year of not having a lot of possession, I'm not saying that they'll get very far in the Champions League, but I think they might surprise a few people. One, because they're more physical than, say, a lot of European sides are used to. And you saw when Dortmund played under Klopp, when they first burst onto the scene in Europe, that teams didn't know how to handle them because they could press, but at the same time, they could have none of the ball and break on them so quickly, and they had so much pace and could just hit a long ball if they needed to players like Royce and that I think Vardy might actually be a bit more of a handful than some teams expect. So I think they could surprise some people. Obviously, a lot of it depends on what players possibly get sold and who they bring in, that kind of thing. But I'd like for them to try and keep that same philosophy and work ethic. And it's a big difference as well. This year they've had the advantage of only playing sort of once a week. Playing 2 games a week does take more of a toll on your squad, and they have to use more rotation, which they haven't really fallen victim to this season.
agreed, yeah. As you say, keeping players is going to be vital because I think a lot of people will fancy Mahrez and Kante in particular. So, interesting. Let's whip through these last couple of questions then and we'll get out of here. Checky Nando's lads, formerly mentioned. Hello again, Checky. John, I'll give you this one. Lots of Leicester questions. Where would Leicester 15-16 Premier League champions-elect rank among the best sides to win the Premier League in terms of quality? Good question, that.
Oh, well. It's really difficult because you look at the really good Man United and Arsenal teams that won the league in terms of technical ability and how they can play different styles. They're not up there with those of, say, like the Arsenal 2003-04 or the Man United side that, say, won the treble 99. And in the sort of the later years with Ronaldo. But they're maybe like possibly like 5th or 6th. They don't have they've got very few flair players. It's mainly Mahrez is their sort of one mercurial talent. But what they have got is that unbelievable consistency and work ethic, and they really trust and believe in each other, and they know exactly what they're doing. They're very fine tuned down to detail, in a sense that kind of in the way that Chelsea were under Mourinho in his first spell at the club, that they would get every single thing done down to detail perfectly. And players who you wouldn't have rated, like Wes Morgan and Robert Huth and people like that, have actually come out as some of the best defenders this season. And someone like Danny Drinkwater, who no one really knew that much about, other than what they'd seen in their struggling relegation team last year, has been one of the best midfielders in the league this year in consistency in terms of passing and work rate and tackles and all that kind of thing. So they're probably a lot higher than people will give them credit for. But in terms of technical ability or flair, then they'll be lower down.
I think that's a very, very well answered, well given answer to that question, which, as I say, I did sneak on you. Right, 3 more. Danny, this one has got an Arsenal flavour to it. It comes from Brian, at Donaldson_Brian. Will the war chest, there's the Arsenal reference, he puts in brackets.
Containing dust.
Yes, TV money.
Tears.
He says, will it make English teams, not just Arsenal, will it make English teams more competitive in the Champions League? Another good question, that.
I'm not sure, because Spurs are going to be using it on their ground. Leicester will probably go mad and just give crisps for everybody. Arsenal's will be squirreled away on a ranch in somewhere in America. Man City, that will just go on Pep's wages. Man United, well, I don't think they're going to be in it. They're on about full league, aren't we? I think you're going to, like we saw last season, the emergence of teams like, did Bournemouth? Yeah, Bournemouth would have got a big, but I don't think they spent too much, did they? Stoke definitely did. Southampton spent pretty well.
Everton as well, they're going to have some money, aren't they?
Yeah, Norwich spent a lot of money in January, and that did bugger all, as much like Newcastle did. So I think a couple of teams did and a couple of teams didn't, but whether they're going to... I think if you put all the teams in the league, in the top 5 leagues in Europe, into an 100-team league and played the season over 4 years, that's the only way you can tell who's done what. I think the English teams would do a little bit better, because once you get outside the top 3 or 4 teams in Spain, they're all skint, because they don't have parity when it comes to the TV, do they? Italy, everyone's skint, because there's just not much foot money in Italy at the moment, but that is changing. But that's why Juventus went and got their own stadium, didn't they? So they own it rather than rent it, because most of the stadiums in Italy are rented. That's why a lot of them share the stadiums. That's why Inter and AC both want away from the San Siro. The offspring went to Italy and said she saw the San Siro. She wasn't overly impressed. And I'm trying to think of what other ones. Germany, I think Germany's very well organised, and everyone gets a fair slice of the cake. So I think overall, yes, there is going to be a few teams that are going to do really, really well, but a lot of them are going to get themselves massively in debt, maybe do a Newcastle and waste an entire load of money on some players that aren't going to fit in just because they've got the money, end up getting relegated, and then end up doing what Bolton are doing now, ending up going down to the 3rd tier of English football with debts of about 100 million quid. So it goes in every direction.
We should say, of course, that despite not having a championship round, at Bolton did indeed go this weekend. So sad times for them.
I'll just quickly answer that question and say that TV money will make... The only difference it will make is that English teams will spend even more money on players that are massively overrated and given more wages, and it will have absolutely no impact on our performance as the Premier League in Europe. The one saving grace will perhaps be Pep at Man City, just because he knows the Champions League so well. But I don't expect anyone else to improve, and I still expect that Spain will come out on top in both European competitions, and Italy and Germany will probably outperform us as well.
But it looks like from the Championship, it's going to be Burnley, Middlesbrough, and then one of the next few. So I think Hull are making another run for it, but Brighton are hitting a bit of a stumbling block. Derby have had another good run of 2 or 3 decent back-to-back games.
Sheffield Wednesday, despite their defeat yesterday, is still right up there as well.
Yeah, before that they had 4 straight wins. So it's like Ross always says, it's such an interesting league.
It is.
Yeah, but it's sad to see Bolton, who weren't that long ago, they had JJ Okocha, isn't that Iwobi's uncle?
Iwobi's uncle, absolutely. Yeah.
And Charlton are recently a Premier League team as well. And all those teams going down again.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. It's just just annoys me that there'll be teams in the Premier League that are getting more money than they can count. And if the money was spread out evenly over all the clubs, then that was a question that someone sent into the show about why don't we get players from lower leagues? Did you have that one?
I've got it next. I've got it. It's from our good friend Carl, who both of you will
say that.
Both of you will know. Well, I'll let you have that one, Danny. I'll give John the other one. So 2 questions for Carl. This one for you, John. Do you think there are any mid-table managers that could take over a quote-unquote big team and make a successful title bid?
Any what managers? Sorry, I didn't catch that last.
Any mid-table managers or clubs, so like an Eddie Howe, Kike Sanchez-Flores, that could go to a bigger side and then steer them to a title challenge? Pochettino, I guess, is the example he's using there.
Yeah, I mean, Pochettino is a good example. Koeman, possibly. I do think he's a good manager. It's difficult because I always hate saying mid-tier side, but West Ham are 6th at the moment. I wouldn't exactly say they're mid-tier, but Slaven Bilic is a manager who I think has got a real prospect, maybe in a few years, of getting a big job and doing it. I think he's a good enough manager. I would also say, I know Mark Hughes has already been at Man City, but I do think Mark Hughes is a quite underrated manager as well. So there are managers there. The thing is, you're never going to see a Tony Pulis, Sam Allardyce, or any of those kind of managers at a club given time to spend money and develop a different style of football because they are brought in specifically to do one thing and one job. And I think if you ask them honestly, if they could play a different style, more expressive style of football, they probably would. But they are always in positions where they don't get a chance to. But I'd love to see a Sam Allardyce or someone like that, at a Chelsea or a Man United and have a big, load of money and some real flair players and to really actually go at it and see what they could do with it. Because tactically, they're brilliant managers. That's the one thing you can never fault them on. But I think for the ones that are in the league, that I think Slaven Bilic is probably my pick of who will be sort of plucked from West Ham, maybe in a few years' time. But you never know. West Ham in a new stadium, they could be a new power in English football with that big stadium they've got there.
So true. Yeah, so true. Absolutely. Good question, that. And Carl's final question, Danny, as you just touched on. Why are the bigger clubs so scared to go into the lower English leagues to buy players? Obviously, Jamie Vardy is the shining example. As indeed, you could say Danny Drinkwater, who was a case at Man United's books, but he made his name lower down. Wes Morgan, they're all Leicester players, of course, but Dele Alli is the other one. What do you make of that? Why are clubs so afraid to dip lower?
I don't think they trust them because they want to get big names, don't they? And plus, you've always got the English premium, which is always based in England premium. Like Benik Afobe, he cost Bournemouth £12 million from Wolves, and that's not. At first, he made a good start. I think he's had a bit of a few injuries, and then that was just this last transfer window gone. And then before that, they bought Tyrone Mings. I think that was about another £10 million from a Championship side. Lee Tomlin, ex-Peterborough player, and that was from Middlesbrough. And I think they paid about 3 or 4 million. And then I'm just looking at the other players they bought. And then I'm looking at the top team. If you do have a decent player in the Championship, then it's usually another Championship side that comes for them. At Sheffield Wednesday, all the players they've bought, they say that the prices aren't available. And then you've got Blackburn, who had their best player, and they sold him to Middlesbrough.
Jordan Rhodes.
Jordan Rhodes, and so he went for about £15 million. No Premier League team is going to risk £15 million on a Championship player because they wouldn't see it. I mean, what could you buy in Europe for £15 million? You could get some of the best players, average players in Europe for that, for the best top of the average sort of players. And then you've got who was that one? They went to Leeds. He was a striker. He was at some other club that wasn't doing too well. Was it for Cardiff or something like that? They ended up paying about £14 million for him.
Was it Danny Graham? Was it that one you think?
No, that wasn't
Ross McCormack.
That's it.
Yeah,
from Fulham.
Yeah.
And so I'm just looking for all the other top teams in the Championship. There's who's top at the moment? I'm just looking at this one here. Burnley, they bought one from Brentford recently.
Andre Gray, yeah. He's top scorer in the Championship.
And then Brighton haven't bought any. They haven't bought any. And then there's who's this one? Derby have spent quite a bit of money, and they bought Nick Blackman from Reading. They bought Olsen from Blackburn. And what did they get in 2015? They bought Tom Ince, so he's turned out to be a fantastic buy. But that's from a team that just got relegated from the Premier League. And yeah, Tom Ince, didn't he go to Liverpool for a while?
He was linked with them, but never actually went. I don't think.
I
think was he on their books? So they had a buyback option, and they let him go.
Yeah, he was linked with Roma and Inter, Lazio.
Yeah. He went to Inter on trial, didn't he, for a 2-day trial?
They sold him to Liverpool, sold him to Blackpool for £65,000, and a few years later, Hull sold him to Derby for £6 and a bit million. I think the gist of it is, if you've got £10 million, that isn't going to buy you the best player in the Championship, but that could buy you the best player, one of the top players in France. Once you take out PSG, they could buy. I mean, there's many clubs in France that wouldn't sell you their best player for 10 million quid or 15 million quid.
No. I mean, even a Marseille or a Lyon are going to listen to offers in the £10-15 million.
Apart from Fekir and maybe Lacazette.
Well, even Lacazette was linked with Newcastle for £14.5 million, which is nothing.
So what would you rather have? Would you have Jordan Rhodes or him?
Oh, I'd always go foreign because I don't think English players are good enough. It's the truth. I think there are exceptions. As much as it pains me to say it, Dele Alli has proven that if
McDonald's, the Scottish team,
if you pick the right players and they fit the right system, that it can happen. But if you look at it, on a grander scale, there are more failures than there are success stories. And I think also,
there's an element also of English players tend to get. If you look at their wages, they're so high in comparison to a lot of the foreign players that come in. Actually,
yeah.
If to say that someone like, say, Paul Pogba at Juventus is on only £75,000 a week, it's obviously a lot of money. But you compare that to some, Premier League players, that's nothing at all. He could earn triple that, 4 times that. And you could go to sign an English player, and they say, well, I could sign for you, or, and you could be an Arsenal, you could be a Man United, or they go, well, I could sign for Newcastle, and they're offering me, 70, 80 grand a week, so you're going to pay me more than that. And that's a really high premium, and the fact that, the English quota that you have to have of sort of homegrown players really affects their price. It is obscene how much money English players cost in comparison.
And I think typically, just to round this off, it's the lower down the spectrum clubs that tend to take the chances on the players from lower down the leagues.
They have to take that punt, don't
absolutely,
they?
Yeah.
But there's plenty of talent in the lower leagues that definitely does not get seen at all.
They're more likely to play at the lower clubs as well, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think if clubs actually, I think it is a trend. It's starting to happen a bit more now. But if Premier League clubs want to find bargains and real hidden gems, they do only need to look lower down the leagues because there are quality players there.
Absolutely.
Even our own club, we've dipped in and out a few times. Like Matt Macey, we got him from Bristol
Rovers.
Yeah, Cole Jenkinson. We picked him up, didn't we? And
well, even Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain and Theo Walcott were at Southampton when Saints were in League One. So it's definitely there, and
it's just not as common as perhaps it should be.
No,
we used to in the old days. Some of our best players came from. I think Stoke were in Division 2, the second tier of English football. When we bought Bold and Dixon off of them, I think Leeds had just got relegated. We've then bought John Lukic. I mean, this is the early '80s stuff.
Another big part of it is obviously if you, especially at the sort of the quote unquote bigger clubs, you have to get players who are going to have an immediate impact on the team. Because as a manager, if you get the wrong player, you are going to be sacked. More pressure. Depending at the club you're at, you will be sacked.
No, I agree with that.
Especially if you're a manager of Palermo, you get sacked if the wind changes direction.
Good grief, yeah, don't remind me of Palermo. Right, okay, well, I think that'll do it for tonight. We thought it'd be a shorter show, and it's probably been a longer one, but we had much to discuss. I should say at this point, somebody asked us, I think it was Gooner Outpost, asked us a really excellent question last week, and it just missed the cut-off, didn't it, Danny? So,
I said, ask us again next week.
Yes, and I'm frantically searching my timeline to see if I can find it, but if we didn't ask, I found it. Here you go.
Good. Saviour.
So I'll ask you this, Danny, just to draw a line, because it's only fair we do this. His question last week, this is at Gunner Outpost. It's I've lost it. Hang on, there we go. 5 players that are certain to get moves to clubs if they're relegated from the Premier League. Now, obviously, we kind of answered that question earlier, so I just want to highlight a player that he said he would take and get your opinion. He said, I would take Wijnaldum, move to Newcastle for 14.5 million, so he might be available for 10 or under. So what I want to ask you, Danny, is just taking his question in a slightly different direction. Would you see a player like Giorgio Wijnaldum at one of the top 4 clubs, or do you think he's a bit below that as a player that you could get for cheap from a side that could go down?
Well, currently, I think Leicester and Spurs, they're a top 4 team. That's the kind of player they'd both go for. But the usual top 4, no, he wouldn't get. I think he wouldn't get anywhere near them. Definitely not Man City or Chelsea, because they really want your 20, 30 million pound players ones. Man United aren't really in a position to buy promising young players, and we have 30 midfielders at Arsenal, so we wouldn't have him. But I could see someone like Spurs taking him, giving him 6 months to settle in and play him every now and then. But yeah, he's not a big enough name for the other teams. I think that's what they're all about. It's not necessarily how good they are with some of these teams. It's how big the player's name is. Because I think the amount of money they get from image rights and from shirt sales and all that other stuff, and plus the sell-on value as well. You might be taking a bit of a gamble with him. Although he's done well with a team that is almost certainly going down, will he be doing that with another team?
And of course the Depay factor, who was brought in at mid's big fanfare. He was PSV's star and has largely flopped, and Wijnaldum was the other one of PSV that was the star. So, yeah, tough. But good question, Gunnar Uppo. Sorry that somebody kind of stole your thunder this week, but nevertheless, we have given you a nod and indeed a wink. So there you go. Thank you for the question. Right, that really is it this time, because we've all got stuff to do and houses to go to and people to rob. So
I've got a great quote to end the show on.
Go for it.
It's from Robert Hoof. He tweeted it tonight, and it's about their Champions League.
This.
Yeah. It just says, and this is from his official account. This is Robert Hoof, wonderful, big, massive German defender. Yes, Champions League guaranteed. Better start practicing my Rabonas. Which I thought was absolutely fantastic.
Can you imagine? It would be like, who's that player that did it? Was it David Dunn who did one at Birmingham and fell on his own feet? Yeah, it'd be like that, wouldn't it?
Kicked his own foot.
Yeah. God bless Robert Hoos. Yeah, sense of humour, like it. So we'll end on that then. As we always say, do keep your beard strong and indeed your glasses trendy. We will return with a pod tomorrow night. Myself and John will return for the regular pod tomorrow. I think we've got the full crew back together again. Famous last words, but as far as I know, we do. So that will be available on Tuesday as usual. Myself and John are planning to do a satchel this week, because we didn't do one last week, John, because we thought we'd rather wrap up when all the ties are complete, didn't we? So we thought we'd rather do one on Thursday this week to go through all the qualified teams from the week's Champions League. So, and of course Europa League. So we'll be back on Thursday and on Tuesday. And Danny, you will be back with me next Sunday with Ross again, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm looking forward to it.
Good times. As usual, give us a follow at the FH Podcast. We're on YouTube. You can find all of our back catalogue if you really want to listen to old pods. You can find us on iTunes. Give us a little subscribe and a little review if you like what we do. And give us a little thumbs up on YouTube. We appreciate it. So, thank you, Danny, very much. You kind of have to be here to use the running joke. And John, thank you very much for becoming Ross for a week.
That's quite all right. I'm sorry I wasn't as good as Ross. He's much better than me, but I tried.
God bless you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you all for your listening ears. Do enjoy your Mondays / Sunday nights / whenever you listen to this. And we will speak to you on the main pod tomorrow. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's Bergkamp. That's magnificent.
Mark Vivian Foet, Sinclair's cross over Cunningham.
Di Canio! Oh, I do not believe that. That is sensational.
Tissier. He's going for goal again. Oh! Only Matthew Le Tissier can score goals like that.
Collymore closing in.